Welcome to the world according to Mark. This is your host, Mark Lieberman, broadcasting through the stations of WPVM FM 103.7 on your dial, which streams on WPVMFM.org. And today I want to welcome to the show William Hamilton, and I'm only going to say Dr. once, Dr. Noah. Help me with this pronunciation. I should have figured that out. Ranells?
Noah
Okay.
Ranells.
Ranells, I did it. Okay. So thank both of you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mark, for having us.
Good. Well, these two gentlemen are connected with the North Carolina Extension Service, and specifically with a program called FarmLink. And we're going to try to figure out what FarmLink does and what these two gentlemen do. But it has to do, obviously, with farms and land, which sometimes is the same thing. So let me start out by saying a couple of things that I learned in preparation for the show, but I should have known anyhow from just living in Western North Carolina. And that is that agriculture and agricultural land obviously is very important for any number of purposes, production of food obviously being key, but it's also been sustaining and income producing for farmers for forever, it would seem. The farmers have a very difficult job. It's, I think, becoming increasingly difficult because of climate change and also development. And I think that getting new people into what can be a backbreaking type of job, even if with the advent of machinery that does a lot of things, can result in a disappearance of farms and a disappearance of farmers. And the question that these gentlemen will talk to us about is, how do you deal with that? And how do we deal with the preservation of a very important asset? And how do they render assistance to people who are interested in being connected to farming and agriculture, and those who have done it for a while and are seeking to move on with their lives, or perhaps pass along their farms to their children or other third parties? And I think if that's a good introduction, I'm going to let Noah and William respond as to how that stacks up in terms of what you think the primary purpose is of FarmLink and the extension program. So who wants to start?
Well, I'll jump in, and I'm gonna be very reliant on Noah to and hope he's relying on me here. We're Noah and I are the two staff of NC FarmLink, a special program of NC State University Extension, and we serve 100 counties. I'm based in the western half of the state, and Noah is based in the eastern half of the state. From my perspective, the primary purpose of NC FarmLink is to connect farmers who are seeking land with landowners who would like to see their land stay in a productive agricultural state. And those farmers can be either newcomers to farming, or midlife career change folks, or experienced farmers that need more land to make their operations more viable. There's lots of benefits of the benefits of farmland are the public, but the benefits of farmland staying in an agricultural state are are multiple fold. You know, besides just being a place to grow food and fiber, it stands alone as open space, which is good for our groundwater recharge whenever land is not paved over or built on. It gives our rainwater a chance to percolate down into the soil and be there in our aquifers for clean well water. It reduces runoff. It provides a place for wildlife and preserves our scenic and cultural heritage as well. And so I've gone on there a little bit more. Noah, surely you have something to add about the primary purpose of NC FarmLink.
Sure. Setting the stage for why a program like NC FarmLink exists is first and foremost, North Carolina is a tremendously strong agricultural state with 8.4 million acres of farmland production. And that produces a value of $12.5 billion for the state. At the same time, we look at our aging farmers, and we have 5 times as many producers over 65 as those under 35. So we have an aging farmland base in the state. And then those aging farmers are going to retire or change careers, stop farming. We have an estimate of 17% within 5 years. Another 30% don't know. So we're talking close to 50% may retire in 5 years. And 60% of those do not have a succession plan. So that means they don't have a plan on how their farmland might continue as farmland, just like William was saying. 60% don't have that plan in place or someone identified to do that, which puts all the land that 60% of operators that are going to retire in the next 5 years at risk. And then just one other study done by American Farmland Trust, the 15-year study that ended in 2016, put 731,000 acres in North Carolina converted to urban and highly developed, as well as low density residential. And that land, trends show that land is moving towards subdivisions or the exempt 10-acre lots, which dissect farmland and don't allow it to continue to be productive. And that land essentially represents a loss, an estimated loss of $911 million in ag revenue. That's 731,000 plus acres represents a tremendous loss in value to the state. And that puts North Carolina only second in the whole United States for farmland conversion. And that's just behind Texas. So those issues relating to the aging farmer population, farmers retiring, and transition of land provide a really strong foundation for public support, university support in the extension program for NC FarmLink.
So when you say no, provides a foundation, another way of saying that is that because of the challenges to retention of land for agriculture, and because of the importance of agriculture, farmers and people who are interested in farming need support, various kinds of support, which FarmLink presumably provides. I know you have a database of land, and I know you do some matching, and I'd like to talk about that. But that's what you're saying, that there's an important resource. It's rapidly being converted. Much of it's rapidly being converted to other uses, you have the situation of the aging farmer, and I was alluding to earlier, but wasn't explicit about it, is you have all the challenges to farming, which is climate change, government policies with respect to export, taxation, and just the burden essentially of trying to compete in the world market makes agriculture particularly vulnerable to people getting out of it. Now, by the same token, I think in North Carolina we see a fair amount of organic farming and young folks getting back into it, but maybe that's a bit of a distraction or illusion as to what's really going on a grander scale in North Carolina and the rest of the United States. It's preserving farmland, I guess, is going to continue to be an important issue.
Yeah, and let me just share, the context of it being housed in the cooperative extension centers across the state. As William said, we represent the Extension Service as a program, and that program is leveraged by county centers in each and every county across the state. And we have those agents, those staff coming to us and saying people are contacting them on how to enter farming and how to transition land, especially folks who may not have other land available. And another big challenge is absentee landowners that don't go into the extension centers. They might call us, but people who own farmland who maybe have been removed from it, don't live on the land, and yet they represent a big chunk of farmland in the state, and reaching them through NC FarmLink is one of our missions, as well as serving those who come into the county centers and contact us. Our website online, ncfarmlink.ces.ncsu.edu, is a great place for listeners to go and see what we do, examples, and they can also request meetings with William and I to pursue concerns they have if they're a farm seeker, what the next step might be, and they're a landowner, what the options are that they might pursue. William, you had something to say. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just, what I was leaning towards based on, what you were saying, Noah, and hopefully this addresses what you were talking about, Mark, is that, a lot of the communication I get from landowners are from landowners that own farmland, landowning families that own farmland, but they're not farmers, and these are usually children that have inherited farmland from their parents, or they've got land in the family. I think 1 out of every 100 people in this country are farmers. Is that still right, Noah? That maybe 1% of the population farms, and so the majority of farmland. Many farmers do not own the land that they farm. The majority of farmland in the state is leased from non-farming landowners to farmers, and so as this next generation becomes in control of the farmland, these people have gone off and had all types of other professional careers, and they're often, one of the big questions we get is, how much should I rent my land for, and or what's a reasonable way? And so we can't tell people, because we're public servants, of exactly what to rent their land for, but we can put it in perspective. And a lot of times that is just helping them understand what a reasonable range would be, and giving them the confidence to continue to lease their land, giving them the confidence to continue to own their land as farmland, and not give up on the complications of it and just sell it for a housing development or some commercial use. Because sometimes easier than having to deal with somebody else. So I think what Noah and I are trying to do with NC FarmLink is work towards an effort of stabilizing the agricultural land base in a way. And so a lot of times for me, when I'm talking to landowners, it's giving them the confidence that, like, what are the bookends of owning land, and how they can keep it affordable to own themselves, and then helping them build relationships in their own communities with farmers, because these lease arrangements, if there's not good communication, if the expectations aren't laid out clearly up front, then relationships can go sour because there's people involved. So
that across the state, it's about 42% of land is rented, as William was highlighting there. And William just added the comment about the leases, and we do offer an example lease on the website. But a lot of times people want to touch base with us on the phone and or email and talk a little bit more about the specifics about their arrangement. And that might be a landowner asking us, as well as a farm seeker. And historically, a lot of the leases were handshakes. Because of the absentee landowner issue, and the larger the parcel, the more security there is for someone who's leasing land from a landowner to have that in writing. And we try to put the options out there and follow the KISS principle of keep it simple for both sides. Yet it's very important, especially if there's assets on the ground, if there are buildings involved, fences, wells, coolers, and greenhouses, that who's responsible for the maintenance of those issues, repair, and so on. So down the road, there's clarity surrounding that, as opposed to confusion, because confusion just doesn't continue a good relationship, landowner-tenant relationship, into the future if there's confusion about issues on an ongoing basis. So with a lease and guidance, we try and help folks navigate through that.
here's one example of just quickly before you go on to the next thing, Mark. I'm sorry that I got a call about 2 months ago from a woman in Austria, in Europe, who had inherited 25 acres of farmland in Iredell County, and she just and it didn't take much, but I was able to look up the U.S. Department of Agricultural average rental rates for 2020 2019, and then talk to some local people in Iredell County too, to make sure my numbers were reasonable. And just got back with her and gave her the confidence she needed to work out a good agreement with the farmer.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that example, because I think, again, to give the clearest picture of what you do and what FarmLink does, examples tell a story more than just the raw numbers. But I want to ask a leading question on this. You mentioned that it's the two of you that cover a bunch of counties in North Carolina. I'm struck by that. I'm sure you have some additional support, and there's other organizations that provide data and information. But the thing that the two of you do, from what we talked about earlier and from what I had been reading, is you offer a lot of personal care, hand-holding, leading people through whatever their particular issue is. They're tired of farming, or they've never farmed, or they're not making a good income, or they're not sure that their children are going to take over, or they want their children to take over. How do you manage that process? I know you have, again, other resources and databases and matching, but it sounds like it's a very personal thing that you do in your interactions with farmers and owners and lessees and so on and so forth.
Well, just to be realistic, Mark, since Noah and I serve 100 counties, for me, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease when it comes to people that, if they reach out to me personally, if they reach out to Noah personally, we do the best we can to give them the customer service. And then but a great part of our a really strong part of our program is the self-serving matching service that landowners and farmers can find each other. They can see their contact information there. They may work out a deal and we don't even know about it until a year later. We have to kind of track people down. So, but
so these are people, I'm sorry, William, are these people that basically use what's available on your website, a database or a matching service, and they can do it by themselves? They don't need to call.
Noah, would you like to explain what the strength of our
matching program,
the software
Sure.
that we use?
Yeah, I think when we created FarmLink, and it's existed since 2014, funded by a USDA grant for beginning farmers, ranchers, and their development. NC State Cooperative Extension took it as a program under its wing in 2018, but it has been existed and affiliated, especially in the western part of the state, with NC State and Extension since its inception. But since we started creating the database to allow people, I guess, transparency in that connection process, for farm owners to be able to set up profiles online that they control. We review all of them for completeness, but once they're in our system, they can be accessed by a farm seeker, and a farm seeker can see the information. Any user can see the information once they're affiliated with an account with NC FarmLink. Those farm seekers, they can actually see the contact information. Now, those farm seekers don't necessarily have to have a public viewable profile online. They can, even if they have an account with us, they don't have to have the profile, and they can still see all the contact information from those landowners. And while we focus on land that might be for sale, and especially land that is leasable, we also do have listing opportunities related around landowners and farmers who want to offer employment or business or partnerships, menteeships, and other apprenticeship type organization systems on farms. That's also an option within FarmLink to use. So yeah, the bottom line is we want to put it all out there. So there's no gates. People don't have to jump through hurdles to try and find this information. It's all online. And there are resources online about how to navigate that process. But then if there's any concern that people have, they can contact William or I, and we can follow up. But as William said, because we're so limited across the state, and we know the database really well. We know the process of farming, farm transition pretty well, and we're ready to support the county agents across the state. But they've got so many other tasks that they're working on in each of the counties that sometimes they'll refer people directly to us, and we're happy to do that, especially given some of the successes we've had, where people likely would not be where they are. Young farmers would not be where they are if FarmLink wasn't there as a facilitating force.
I'd like to give, I don't know, Mark, if it'd be helpful for us to give you some examples of some situations where we have done some hand holding.
I think it would be very helpful. Let me just, again, for those just tuning in, My guests today are William Hamilton and Noah Ranells, who are with the extension program, specifically directors of a program called FarmLink. And we've talked about some of what they do in a global fashion. William is going to give us some true to life things to sort of put more flesh on the bones. But before you do, I just want to say again, maybe both of you are being a bit modest about your level of involvement, but it seems to me that anything involving what do you do with this land and how do we sustain it? How do we get an economic return on it? How do we identify the best opportunities? It's not just a question of matching people, unless these farmers have, access to other advisors, lawyers who draft up papers. There are a lot of variable issues that would have to be discussed at some level, including just the land management and tax consequences and subdivisions and, probably environmental concerns. So I think maybe your illustrations, William, will sort of flesh that out. So take off on that.
Thanks, Mark. Here's just an example of a woman bought 100 acres in Guilford County, south of Greensboro, in a place called Pleasant Gardens. And her main concern when she called me was that she did not want to have to take care of a 100-acre front yard. It was mostly open hay ground. It was an old a cattle farm. I think she had done some kind of 1031 exchange and bought it. This was something, and so she reached out to me, and it took about 8 months of back and forth. But at the end of the day, I told her when she was trying to make decisions on who she should work with. I said, look, who's of the people that you've interviewed, whose tractor do you want to lean up against the tire and talk about things with? Who do you trust? Who do you have good chemistry here? But it was a struggle for her, being a newcomer in that area, to make a good decision on who she wanted to have farming her land. It was really important to her to have somebody she trusted. So because I don't work in Guilford County and I don't know people down there, I reached out to a local livestock agent. And this is the strength of extension. We have people on the ground in every state we can call, and they do know people. And so I helped this woman create a profile on our site that had an accurate description of what she was making available, and pictures and a map, and sent that to the local agent, who then forwarded it on to his list of growers, because that's the strength of the local agent, is they build a network of all the farmers that they serve. And that same day, she got 5 phone calls and set up appointments for the next day and interviewed 5 people. And by the end of the day, she had chosen somebody to farm her land, and it was just going to be for hay production. But the interesting thing was that the person that she chose was somebody that she would not have met necessarily, but it was her adjoining landowner behind her. And I don't think she would have gotten to meet them had it not been through for NC FarmLink and NC State Extension. She's very happy with the arrangement, and I was able to help her make a have realistic expectations of what an agreement with a tenant farmer would look like. I also helped her while she was buying it, take on the deferred agricultural taxes of the previous landowner and sign up for the present use value program, saving her and the seller of the farm about $45,000 apiece. So,
So that's you acting in the capacity of a real estate broker and a tax lawyer. And what, did you make a big commission off of that, William?
not
Not a cent.
not a dime.
Not a turnip.
She did make a contribution to the agricultural foundation, which NC FarmLink has as a way for people to make charitable gifts to help us run our program. But she was so grateful for that. And you did say that we do the job of a real estate broker, a tax accountant, a lawyer, and a priest. But actually, we don't offer any legal advice. We don't offer any tax advice. We're
And no spiritual advice
about that.
But again, all kidding aside, I mean, that you helped make her day, so to speak, and more than just a day, by setting up the profile, giving her the opportunity to make contacts. But for your intervention, that story wouldn't have necessarily a happy ending. And I think that's what I think is remarkable. And again, both of you are sort of understated in terms of the contribution you make. And I think people need to recognize the value.
Thanks so much, Mark. Noah, you should tell the story about Nourishing Acres Farm, because that's a very unique situation. I don't know if you have any others that you wanted to tell, but.
Sure, happy to do that. And just hearing these stories is always good for us of successes, because it reminds us of how we work and how we work through county agents and other extension staff. And without them, we couldn't do the job that we're doing. The case that William just mentioned of Nourishing Acres here in Orange County, Nourishing Acres is a farm you can go buy from, CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Program. They also sell at the Carborough Farmers Market, and through Weaver Street Market, which has stores in Hillsborough, Chapel Hill, Carborough area, and in Raleigh. But this was a farm that really had its birth through NC FarmLink. It was a couple living in the county, Bernadette Pellissier and Van Bennett, who were headed to retirement years, non-farmers in this case, but they, having lived in Orange County, and Bernadette Pellissier being a county commissioner for several years, really embraced the opportunity in Orange County for young farmers. And one way, perhaps a critical way that young farmers are helped is by availability of land. And they bought a farm with the intention of working with NC FarmLink and finding a young farmer to work on that. And with that, Nourishing Acres came to be associated with Van and Bernadette. And I think they probably got a relationship now going on 6 or 7 years, maybe longer. Time flies the older you get. Being 58, I don't keep track of time that good. But this is a great example of young farmers and people who are pretty much retirees using some of their lifetime savings and investing in farmland to try and keep it productive. And that's Nourishing Acres. They've got a website, nourishingacres.com on the online. I urge you to look at them and go visit them and market if you happen to be down in this area. But William, that's a different kind of example. You shared the example of essentially a landowner from out of state buying land here in the state. This is a couple that has lived in Orange County and worked locally for many years. And we have a diversity of clients, the way we call them, farm seekers and landowners.
I've got one more example, though, if you want to.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, we've got several that. This is a really interesting one. It's we take seriously our the concept of working with underserved people, and you know, and so here's a story. And I got a call from a woman in Henderson County, Dahlia, and she is the leader of a co-op of 8 families, half of who are from Ecuador and half from Mexico. And you know, these people have struggled and fought and their way for a quality life here in the United States. And they have left families behind, they have left traditions behind, they've left their a lot of that behind. And so this was a co-op called Tierra Fertil that this group of 8 families created to grow their own food and to sell excess food. And they were looking for a land opportunity. And so I reached out to a land trust over in Henderson County, Conserving Carolina. And sometimes land trust will get what's called trade lands, land donated to them that they can really make arbitrary decisions on what they want to do with it. And so working that angle, the Conserving Carolina has agreed to start out by leasing them 10 acres across from West Henderson High School, with the idea that if they stay committed to it, to donate the land to them. And it's got a beautiful creek running through it with big trees. And so we view this as a place for them to grow a portion of what they want to produce, because not all of it's very productive land, but a place where these families can gather at the end of the day or after school, give their kids a chance to play in the creek and stuff like that, where not necessarily having to rely on a public park and having to leave at dark. You know, becoming an American citizen, I think for as long as America has existed, has a big driver has become is private property rights. And so giving a chance for these underserved people to enjoy private property of their own was a satisfactory outcome of that arrangement.
Well, I wanted to, that's a really enlightening example of what you do. I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. First of all, this concept of land trusts. I know that is considered to be a significant opportunity or way of preserving land in the state of North Carolina, presumably across the country. And you mentioned that that the land trust is a sort of a repository of property that people have decided they don't want anymore, and they've donated it. But how does North Carolina get actively involved again in doing something with that land? The example you just gave was there was a recognition that the individuals from South America were disadvantaged and presumably could not on their own afford to outright purchase the land, but an opportunity was created where they could provide, in effect, sweat equity, and then ultimately get control of the land. Is the land trust concept something that that FarmLink actively promotes, or does that fall in the lap of some other agency?
We work regularly with land trust. We've got 5 or 6 land trusts that are using NC FarmLink to advertise land opportunities. We certainly promote the efforts of the land trust and seek ways to partner with them. Anything to add to that, Noah?
Yeah, I just the example of town of Cary and Good Hope Farm, which is you know, municipal owned land that the town of Cary has dedicated to farming purposes, and they have a wonderful variety of local farmers there, and they you can say put up their profile on NC FarmLink to help, excuse me, find land, find farm seekers that might be interested in their land. So it's not necessarily all the time a trust per se. It might be publicly held land, but it does follow that farm commons approach to who owns the land. And there's more and more exciting ways that people are looking at farm tenure and land ownership to ensure that it's locally held, locally managed, and helping to facilitate, in some cases, absentee landowners from out of state with that local farm management or oversight. Lots of new things happening in land tenure just because land is so expensive, and farms, produce farms, vegetable flower farms certainly might be able to do it on 10 or 20 acres, which someone could buy. But if people are looking at grass-based cattle, goats and sheep, or row crop production, soybean, corn, and so on, that's a larger scale acreage, and we increasingly find it to be challenging, almost impossible for young farmers to enter farming unless it's a leased arrangement, renting a farmland, or they have resources in their family or otherwise that they could buy it. And that's where FarmLink increasingly is more and more important with each passing day and each increase in farmland costs, to try and find those creative ways that people can connect and keep farmland productive in North Carolina.
So let me just follow up on that with both Noah and William. Do you get involved? Does FarmLink get involved with individuals who aren't in a position, they're not wanting to sell their land necessarily, but they're having economic distress? They have not been able to produce enough crops, or whether it's wheat or row crops, as you say, to give them a rate of return that allows them to pay all for all the things they have to pay for to run a farm, from fertilizer to irrigation and so on and so forth. Do you two get involved in any respect in looking at an alternative, which is to increase the production as opposed to selling it off, or as opposed to some other land succession concept?
I would think that in a situation like that, I would defer to the local agent that specializes in horticulture or row crops or livestock to give them the best advice to increase their productivity. I think Noah and I are a little bit at a little, maybe I don't get that specific because that's not my expertise. But
even though you're both have horticultural and agronomy training, you're not getting into the rows of corn essentially to produce a better crop. But I would think that maybe one alternative to a struggling farmer might be to get a partnership of someone who can come in and provide some capital, for example, if they need farm equipment that they haven't been able to purchase, and that might increase the yield. And I'm guessing here, but let me also mention, I read about another organization. I don't know if you've had direct experience, called Land Loss Prevention Project, founded in North Carolina in 1982 by the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers to curtail epidemic losses of Black-owned lands in North Carolina. And I guess before I let you comment on it, obviously we know that people of color tend to have a harder time, have other obstacles that everyday folk don't have, for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to go into. But are you involved with, or do you know about the mission of that particular association? And do you have a perspective on how people of color are having maybe even a tougher time than others in terms of retaining their land and not being forced to give it up.
Yeah, that's a big topic there, and it's hard to do it justice. Um, but specifically to the question of land loss prevention project, Savvy Horn, actually someone I've known for many years. I live in Orange County and have worked with her on several projects. Um, but that organization, along with others, Black Land Trusts organizations, have been critical at providing resources, information, and professional services to people who, Black people, other minorities perhaps, that have found really challenging environments to retain land. A big part of that is what they call heirs property, property that if I have land and I pass away without a will, it has to go through probate, and if it never goes through probate, it remains as heirs property. And I hope, as a non-lawyer, I'm still saying it accurately. But it's a really challenging situation for um, Black landowners. And we have a particular interest with NC FarmLink at trying to shed light and clarity on the history of specifically Black farm ownership in North Carolina, and have a couple of pages, web pages, dedicated to that on our website. Um, but we continue to try and reach out to people, a lot of people from out of state actually, who might be Black landowners and trying to reconnect with land, either to come back to North Carolina, or they've inherited it, and what their options are. In some cases, it's just forested land, which has limited potential agriculturally, in terms of a quick turnaround to be productive. In other cases, it's ready to farm land. So land loss prevention project has definitely been working on that. Mavis Gregg and Sam Cook and others who work in the state and speak at conferences share their knowledge around heirs property, and what the next step is for people to try and sort out heirs property. Um, but this is something where William and I provide some good resources at filling the gaps, if there are any, on people who call us and saying, I don't know what to do next. That's the kind of question we love, because that's our job, is providing those options and essentially that pathway forward. How do people figure out what the options are with their land, current issues around who owns it, and a lot of that is online with aerial photography, that we can actually see the land, look at the soils, and look at the ownerships and help them figure it out. So sometimes we're just connecting the dots for people, and that's great because people need dots connected, and it's one way to keep farmland in family hands and protect land's legacies that have been started years ago, that people struggled to purchase land. It's one of the greatest opportunities for us to support people holding on to land within families.
I've got one example there. We got a call from a woman in Lenore County who, this was a farm that her grandfather bought after the Civil War, an African American man, and they still don't know how he ended up able to do that. But it had over time ended up being owned by I think 7 of the family members. It was only about 20 acres, but it had the old home place on it, and they had lost the home place in foreclosure, but then one of the sisters was able to pick it back up. And so you've got maybe 7 different people owning about 20 acres in different parcels. But their big challenge was, as far as making sure to get along as a family and keep the farm together, was they had been leasing it out to a row crop farmer, but they did not know how to divide the rental check. and they weren't even sure they were getting a modern day rate for the rental. And so through some research, talking to local real estate, farm brokers and all that, we discovered that they were receiving a rental rate from of a going rate from 1980s, and so they were able to go from $50 an acre to $100 an acre, and then we were able to through the local GIS mapping software, we were able to calculate the number of acres that each of them owned. So when they did receive their rental check, that they would be able to distribute the money evenly among the family, because I owning land jointly or owning a farm with multiple family owners. One of the most important things is to be able to get along, and oftentimes family disharmony can break up a farm just as much as development pressure. So that's just an example.
So I want to ask another question. It seems like the people that contact you or access the database are highly motivated to maintain farmland as farmland, but I would assume that they have pressures, and maybe they care, maybe they don't care about, quote, selling out. And that's sort of a metaphor, selling out to either a big corporate agribusiness or maybe to a real estate developer that wants to put a bunch of condos on there. Are those issues that you have heard about or talked about or provided counsel on? Because money's a big talking point. If a real estate developer puts a higher value on it than somebody who wants to continue the farm, that's a tantalizing thing to resist.
I'll just speak quickly on that, and but the landowners we work with, they do have to be motivated on their own to have some kind of intrinsic value of the land itself. If people are going to continue to sell land, because the kind of money that people are bringing now, as our metropolitan areas continue to expand, is hard to shake a stick at, and so I understand why people would want out if they don't have an attachment to a piece of property or could afford it. But for those landowners that would like to keep the land in the family, or for all the reasons we're talking about, we can provide guidance on being able to, I guess, keep it affordable. And one of those, this is sort of where FarmLink got its start back in 2013, 2014, at least in the, when I was involved at that time. My limited involvement was that there's this great tax incentive in North Carolina called the present use value, where if you can agree to keep your land in farming for up to 3 years, to get into the program, and then every year thereafter, and can show that you're earning that the farmer is earning $1,000 or more per year, which is pretty doable, then your property taxes, depending on the county you're in and the tax assessment rates, can be, I've seen it drop as much as 90%. And so but the land's got to stay productive. And so if you don't have a farmer farming your land, then you can't show the county that your land is productive. And so you fall out of the program, your taxes go up, and you're more motivated to sell. And so keeping that land productive, keeping a farmer on there, keeps property taxes down, thus making it affordable to keep.
Okay, go ahead. No.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, money talks, as William and you just mentioned. But I think people who own land, it's never too early to consider that concept of a land's legacy, why they purchased that land, and to put that in writing. And there's something called legacy letters, where people just write down why they bought the land, why it's important, some experiences around the land, so that when the time comes to make some decisions, if you know they're not around, then their family can still seek to respect those intentions and why they bought the land. Uh, but managing farmland as an asset and trying to make sure that it helps, a family achieve their goals is real important to us. And it's never too early to start that process of succession planning, or at least jot some notes down, so that when the time comes, there's something already there, and it's not an overwhelming process. Little by little, the bird makes its nest. Families don't become strong agricultural entities quickly. It takes generations, and respecting that, I think, is something that NC FarmLink really hopes to continue to provide support to.
Well, speaking as a lawyer, I guess the legacy planning, unless it's in a document or in a will or something like that, is not binding. I think what you're suggesting is it's the beginning of a discussion, a talking point, and it gets all of the relevant parties, or most of the relevant parties, in line as to what the intentions are, and it helps provide a basis for an ultimate disposition of the property. And again, I don't want to speak too much as a lawyer, but I guess that's what you're suggesting. Is that right? No?
Yeah, it starts, certainly before you go to the lawyer, to make use of lawyers, uh, hourly rates. The more a family can do before going to a lawyer is useful, and that also relates to their property issue, to try and figure out who owns the land and uh, who's heirs to it. But it's a very challenging thing, and yes, it certainly does need to be considered, transforming that into a legal document that has, a binding nature to it. But whether it's a conservation easement or a donated easement, that a landowner couple or family wants to pass on to the next generation, or some other binding aspect of a deed, all that can be done, and allowing people the choice to make those uh, known to their family while they're still around, is a very useful process. It might not be the most comfortable emotionally, um, but when you come out of something like that, that's a real tough aspect of getting through some family issues. It makes a family so much stronger, and allows them to really respect each other as part of the same family, and certainly respect parents and other generations that have passed.
Okay, we just have a little bit of time left, and my producer might jerk my chain here, but has COVID made your jobs harder or easier? And what do you do about places where there's no internet?
Harder, much harder. It's opened some doors as well. We have online meetings. People can sign up online um, to meet with us. We've done some webinars to try and reach out. But as William has stated many times already, that a lot of farmland discussions revolves around in-person discussion, where people gain a trust for one another, where there's a connection, where you can actually walk the land, feel the landscape, look at the past uses of land, and consider its future opportunities. But you can't turn back the time, and COVID's here. But we are getting out a little bit more, and we've seen farmers and local food production in North Carolina come out as a significant opportunity, where folks were very concerned about getting groceries and going shopping in public places. They still went to the farms and did pickups of food. So COVID did demonstrate that farmers are alive and well in North Carolina, and that there really is opportunity for folks to farm.
Well, I want to thank both of my guests, William Hamilton and Noah Reynolds, for bringing us a bit of a picture of how the extension service operates, how FarmLink operates. I think people here, though they may feel enlightened because they buy organic vegetables and they visit farms and things of that nature, I don't think people are aware generally of how important the support system is. And I believe both of you provide tremendous support to the agricultural community. So I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was really wonderful to be able to share what FarmLink does and bring listeners a little bit closer to what the decisions are that folks have to make around farmland and how we can help. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank
Mark,
you.
we appreciate you having us on the show, really, and it's been a pleasure.
Terrific. Thanks. We'll have you back.